Who wants to see what's in my fridge? Am I the only one that likes that kind of stuff? I'm thinking probably not, so there might be a few of you that want to see what's in it, and I am going to show you that in just a minute. But first, I want to give you some information on the fridge that I have and discuss the pros and cons of fridge versus cooler, and then I'm going to show you what all I keep in mine, which is a pretty good representation of what I normally have in there. Of course, it's going to vary trip by trip somewhat, but this will give you an idea of what you would be able to fit in a similar size or in this particular fridge, which I definitely would recommend. Is that a spoiler? That's probably a spoiler. Another spoiler I'm just going to tell you right up here at the beginning. By the way, I'm Heather. This is my channel, Heather's Hikes and adVANtures. And getting a fridge and upgrading from my cooler, best decision, hands down, that I have made in my van life journey so far. Hands down. Favorite upgrade, best decision, do not regret. 11 out of 10 would recommend, and I'm hoping you still want to watch the video after this. Maybe if you're like me and really like to know what people keep in their stuff, you'll want to watch till the end anyways, regardless of knowing how I feel about my fridge. But without further ado, let's dive right into this video. Do y'all see Smokey again, by the way? I told you he is such an attention hog. He's lucky I love him and that I think he's worthy of the spotlight and that I don't think he's trying to steal my thunder. Speaking of refrigeration, I just pulled this ice cold Gatorade from my fridge. Before I get into fridge versus cooler, pro and con, that kind of thing, I kind of wanted to just give you the rundown on my personal fridge so you know what I'm working with, what kind of power draw it takes, that kind of thing. I personally have the Alpicool C20, which is a 20 liter or 21 quart fridge. It's the only one, as far as I know, in the Alpicool line that has kind of like a hump top, for lack of a better explanation, than just the flat top, which I wasn't sure if I was gonna like, because I do like multi-use things, and I wanted to be able to use my fridge as another surface area. And I knew if I got that one, since the top is slightly rounded, it wouldn't make an ideal surface. So, luckily with my setup, the way that I have it now, I wouldn't utilize it as surface space regardless, but I do like the top because it enables me to fit much larger items than you would normally fit in that size capacity fridge. For instance, I can fit a whole gallon jug of milk or juice, or in my case, probably sweet tea mixed, or unsweet and peach tea mixed from Publix, to be specific. But you can basically fit a lot in there, and large full-sized items. You don't have to get little tiny items to fit in there. So that's one of the reasons that I chose that fridge. It's also, and it was in my budget. I waited until it went on a really great lightning deal on Amazon, and I want to say I got it for $179. I think it had been running like $219 to $239 normally. I'll check and see. Well, I'll put the link in the description anyways, so you can see, but I will say that they do run sales. So if it's not in your budget right now, do what I do with everything on Amazon, put it in your cart, save for later, and then just keep checking back like an obsessive freak. And then when it goes on an amazing deal, or you can set an alert, I think, for it to let you know via email, but I'm horrible about checking my emails. So yeah, you can do like I do and wait for it to go on an amazing deal and then snatch it up really quick. So like I said, I got it for $179. Hands down, like I said before, in my opinion, best purchase I've made so far. I mean, aside from maybe my Jackery, but that was more of like a necessity kind of thing, like in order to run everything that I need it to run now and in the future. And speaking of run, I do use my Jackery 1000 to run my fridge. I will say, I got it in the winter, so I first started using it in the winter. Much colder temps, obviously. A lot of nights around freezing or close to. Not hot during the day. Even when I was camping in Florida, I rarely got over, mid 70s when I was camping in the winter. So it would very rarely kick on, and I thought, man, this is amazing. It can run for days. And literally I could easily run it for 4 or 5 days, using it for my electric kettle, which draws 700 watts, like at least once a day, and using it for other items. I was able to use my Jackery without having to keep charging it up for a while, because like I said, my fridge, the compressor would rarely need to kick on. Overnight it would hardly ever kick on, and then during the day every so often it would, to keep that temperature regulated. I will say, with the budget Alpicool C20 at least, I don't know about the higher end Alpicools, but I know with my fridge versus like the Dometic or like one of the other really quality, expensive, aka expensive fridges, you get what you pay for. Those do regulate the temperature better, so the compressor doesn't need to kick on as much, and it's more accurate. I recommend, especially if you have a budget fridge, but really if you have any kind of car fridge, I recommend getting one of those cheap car thermometers. I'll link the one that I got off of Amazon. That way you can see what the actual temp is inside. I believe it goes off of kind of the top level, and so it's colder on the bottom of the fridge than it is on top. Actually, I don't know where the sensor for the compressor is, top versus bottom, but either way, it's much colder a temperature at the very bottom than it is at the very top. So I'll keep things like meat, my leftovers, my drinks that I want really cold, stuff like that. Stuff that I want to keep the coldest, I'll keep on the bottom. Stuff that needs to stay cold, but maybe not quite as cold, like my eggs, my salad, my fruit, things like that, I'll keep along the top, since I know it's not quite as cold there. Another thing with the budget fridges to keep in mind, again, speaking from experience with mine personally, is when you set it for a specific temperature, it doesn't stay that temperature, because of the fact that it doesn't self-regulate quite as well as some of the higher end ones. It does fluctuate before the compressor will kick on, and then before it finally cuts off. So for instance, I personally have found the sweet spot for me is I'll set mine to 36, because I don't want my stuff getting much over 40 degrees for a very long time. And if my fridge cuts off for some reason, if I accidentally unplug it when I'm doing something, or have it open for a while, I don't want it to shoot up to 40 for too long. And because of the fact that it doesn't self-regulate as well, it will go up a little bit to the higher ends before the compressor kicks back on. So when I initially had it set for 38, I noticed it was getting up to like 41, in some cases even 42 before it would kick on. I wasn't comfortable with that because there was no wiggle room. So I found that if I drop it down to 36, while it does keep the stuff on the bottom very cold, sometimes bordering freezing, and there will be a little bit of ice that forms on the bottom part along the sides of the fridge. At least it doesn't go above like 39 before it cuts on. And so it kind of fluctuates. If I have it on 36, I've noticed it kind of goes anywhere between like 32 and 33 on the low end to like 39, 38, 39 on the high ends before it kicks on. And then according to my fridge thermometer, the stuff on the very bottom actually gets a little below freezing. The stuff on the top kind of hovers in that high 30, low 40 range all the time, kind of like 38, 39, 40. So to me, I keep mine on 36. I keep it on eco mode, and I use the 12 volt. Just a tip, with my model and with most models, you're able to either use the regular standard plug or the 12 volt plug. It will draw more power if you use the standard plug. So if you have the standard plug plugged into your Jackery, it's going to draw more power than if you have the 12 volt version of it plugged in. So always use the 12 volt version when you're using it in your car. If you've got it running in your home base or shore power, do whatever you want. I didn't really notice a difference in how often it kicks on or anything like that. I just know it draws more power when you're using the 110 versus the 12 volts. So definitely keep that in mind. Also, when the compressor does kick on, it draws a significant amount of power. I would say maybe, for me, it seems to average between 39 and 41 watts when it's trying to cool. And then when it kicks off, it stays at like 2 watts. So it's basically negligible when it's not running. So like I said, when I first started using it in the winter, it would hardly ever kick on. I was like, oh man, this is great. I mean, I knew once it warmed up, it was going to be running more. So now that it's been really hot and I've been camping, I've been able to kind of give it the true test. So I feel comfortable in giving it a review now, which is why I'm doing this video now. It definitely sucks way more power up when it's hot like this. Way more. For instance, when I got to my campsite yesterday, I was at around 97% on my Jackery because I had it charged in while I was driving for most of the day. So it was at like 97, 98%. And that was around 2:30 in the afternoon, maybe 3. This morning at 10:30, it is at 49%. So it hasn't even been 24 full hours. Now I did use it for my electric kettle once, which again pulls 700 watts. So I did use that to boil water once. I did use it instead of my Jackery 240 like I normally use. I did use my, this one, the 1000, to use my Hot Logic. So that was running about 2 hours, my Hot Logic Mini last night. So I definitely used other stuff. I charged my phone, I charged my fan. So I was definitely using it for other stuff, but it is down to right under 50%. And again, it's been less than 24 hours. So in the winter, that would be way different. But I've noticed it kicks on multiple times an hour in the heat like this when it's really hot out. So you can imagine when your vehicle is just baking in the sun while you're at the trail all day, or, you know, out exploring and doing stuff, that compressor is going to be constantly running on and off and on and off. So just that is something to keep in mind. And so what I do personally is I use my back window cover, the WeatherTech one, the reflective side, and I put that reflective side up, laying across the top, so that it kind of deflects some of the heat from baking into the back. Since there's so many windows back there, I don't want it all just heating up my fridge and making it work harder. Okay, so that's enough blabbing about my fridge. I just wanted to give you the specifics, let you know how much power I use, and that temperature outside definitely makes a huge difference in how long you can run it. So that's definitely something to consider, what your power needs are going to be and what your power source is. Now I want to go ahead and get into fridge versus cooler and the pros and cons of those being compared. All right, yeah, let's take a look inside my fridge and see what's in there. Okay, so I have a couple of ice packs, which if you saw my how to keep cool when the temperatures rise, you'll know why I have those. If not, make sure you go watch it. I have some fresh eggs. I have a bagged Caesar salad. I have half of a full sub from Publix. That's turkey, cheese, bacon, lettuce. You can see there's some sliced extra sharp cheddar under there that I like with crackers. And I have a huge creamer because that's the only one they had in my flavor left at the store. We've got a nice cold Gatorade, and I have a couple that are not cold, but I'll switch out when I take that out. I actually have a cold one in there already. I always keep a fridge thermometer, and as you can see, this is one of the things that I will discuss when I discuss the pros and cons of having a budget fridge. But I do have this to keep an accurate picture of what the actual temps are like. I've got some Canadian bacon, some sliced provolone, and some dark chocolate with sea salt. So I am just gone for a couple days this time, so I don't need a ton of food, but I do like to have a couple of options. And oh, I also have underneath the ice packs, I have some leftover Thai food that is probably what I'm going to heat up for dinner tonight. So as you can see, this Alpicool C20 really does hold quite a bit of stuff, more than enough for one person. Okay, so to the pros and cons of do you want a fridge, or, you know, is it really necessary? Are you fine with a cooler, or do you prefer a cooler over a fridge? Like I said, for me personally, I love having a fridge. I just do. I will be honest, the one thing that I hated about car camping when I first started, the one thing that, well, I mean, aside from the fact that it was like a bazillion degrees in Florida, but the one thing that I really was not sure I was going to be able to deal with long term was the cooler aspect. I just hated dealing with like the squishy, wet ickiness when the ice melted. And I didn't even use like regular ice cubes in there. I followed all of the cooler advice. I used ice packs, like the, you know, the ones that are meant to be frozen. I used frozen bottles, frozen water bottles, frozen, you know, like 3 liters, frozen, just all different kinds of containers to experiment. And I hated it. Even, I mean, no matter what I used, when it started to melt or when it melted, everything would still be like wet. Forget using leftover subs like I had at this last camping trip. The bread would be soggy and gross even if I had it double bagged. I hated using ice. And that wasn't even like, I'm weird. When I stop at the gas station, I don't want to go inside. I just want to pay at the pump and get back on the road. If I go in, I'm like, oh, look at that snack. Or, you know what, I'm on a road trip. I'm going to treat myself. I might as well get, something to drink that I don't normally get. And a little sweet treat. Or if I don't have to go in, I just stop, pay at the pump, and go. And I use the rest areas to pee, and I'm good. I stay right on schedule. That's just how I roll. So, excuse me, I've got the hiccups again for the millionth time. Anyways, so I don't like stopping for ice, is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to have to go in and get ice, pay for ice, wait in line for ice, and then I'm like, oh, I don't want to just get ice, I might as well grab a couple things. No. This way, I do not have to deal with, no matter how long my trip is, replenishing ice, which again, in the winter, might not be a big deal. But in the summer, here in Florida, every other day, at best case scenario, I would need new ice. And there's no way to regulate the temperature like I can with the fridge. So I have no idea what I'm getting. I can keep the thermometer in there, but I mean, forget it. It's just. And then, to me, another huge con of using the cooler instead of the fridge, again, for me, was capacity. For instance, like I said, I have the 21 quart or 20 liter fridge. I think I had a 24 quart cooler. By the time I had enough ice in it to do a decent job, and it was, like the ice packs or the water bottles, it wasn't like little tiny, cubes that you pour in where they fit, because I wanted it to last and I didn't want to deal with the water. So, by the time I got enough ice in the cooler, I didn't have room for my food. So I was able to fit half of what I can fit in my fridge now for technically slightly less capacity, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, it's a lateral move capacity wise. I literally can fit at least twice in there what I could before. And I couldn't fit anything big in there because I had to pack ice all around it. It was always like playing Tetris at first because I needed to make sure that I had it stacked correctly, but also where the ice would fit around it okay. And it was just, to me, the whole thing to do with the cooler was a hassle. So when I first switched to the fridge, I was in heaven. Like I said, I had twice the capacity, the temperature regulation I wanted, even if it isn't as great as a high-end fridge. I didn't have to deal with the inconvenience of refilling the ice. I didn't have to deal with the soggy, icky wetness of dealing with ice. It's just so much more versatile for me, and I feel safe eating food. Like, before, there were times where I was like, I think this is still okay to eat, but I just wasn't comfortable enough to eat it. So I would end up throwing food away that probably was edible still, but I just didn't want to risk it, especially when I'm on the road. So now I feel safe eating my food because I know what temperature it is. So, just all around, for me, as you can see, the pros way outweigh the cons. And honestly, the only con that I can really think of for the fridge is the power draw. It's a major con it's a big issue for people. I totally get that. For me, it was why I held off until I did, because I knew that I didn't have ample power to run one when I very, very, very first started. So I know that it's a big con for most people, and it's probably the number one thing that holds people back from getting one. To me, it was worth it. As soon as I was able to make it happen, I did. If I could have made it happen right away, I would have. I kind of wish maybe I would have tried the solar panel route, like right off the cuff, until I could upgrade the Jackery. But honestly, I still don't think that would have been sufficient, even being able to constantly recharge. So I definitely, before you get a fridge, would have at a minimum the equivalent of the Jackery 500. So at least 500 watt power station or higher. And I'm not sure that's sufficient unless you either drive a lot so you can charge it back up while you're driving regularly, or you have a good way to repower. Either you've got guaranteed shore power or reliable solar, and you know you're going to be able to use reliable solar. Otherwise, especially if you're in a hot, humid climate like me, it would just need to run too much. Like I said, I'm down to 50%. If I had had a 500, it would have drained it in slightly less than 24 hours for all of my needs. If I had not been able to recharge it, technically I was at an electric site, so I could have, but I knew I didn't need to. And I knew with the driving that I was going to be doing later, it would charge back up, and I knew it would be fine until I got back to home base. But that was my number one reason, aside from wanting to be able to boil water with an electric kettle, that I ended up opting for the higher wattage, the 1000. Because I just knew that if I wanted to be off grid for more than a couple of days, if the weather was horrible and I couldn't use solar to recharge, I didn't have shore power, I didn't want to be in a position where it's been less than 2 days and I'm stuck having to go somewhere because I'm out of power. And if I don't plug in, I'm going to lose everything. So now I got to run my car so my food doesn't go bad and so on. So for me, I had to wait till I had ample power. So again, it's a big con. And I hope that this video has given you a reliable or a realistic expectation of, maybe what kind of power needs you would have or you would need to have to be able to get a fridge. But again, all that being said, I think you can clearly tell all of the pros I listed, capacity, food safety, convenience, not having to deal with ice at all, and ickiness, and just, and being able to replenish, like, oh, okay, well, I took out this Gatorade. Let me put in a lukewarm Gatorade that's been sitting in the car and it'll be cold soon. Whereas if I did that with a cooler, it would just suck the cold from the cooler, and since it's not replenishing, it wouldn't be an option. So there's just so many great things about having a fridge if you have the power for it. So again, I can't think of another con. I really, truly can't. I can't think of another reason you would not want a fridge aside from power. So, if you can think of another con, definitely drop it in the comments. I would love to know your perspective on it, but I am definitely team fridge if you can swing it. So, again, I hope this video was helpful. I hope it kind of gave you an idea on, is it worth getting? Is it better to just stick with? If you don't mind getting ice every couple of days, because it's not a big deal. I'm just weird. But if you don't mind replenishing the ice, if none of that is a big deal for you, if you don't mind, reaching into the wet, sloshy, and then pulling out damp, soggy stuff, hey, then it might not be worth it for you to need that much more power. So, because you don't need any with a cooler. So, like I said, I hope I've given you some perspective, something to think about. I hope it's been helpful. I also just recently did a video on refrigeration-free options for meals and how you can eat on the road without needing a cooler or a fridge. So definitely check that out, because you may just decide it's too much of a hassle either way. Scrap the whole refrigeration altogether. You don't need it. And that may be a better option for you. So either way, whichever it is, I hope that watching this has helped you out, and I hope that you decide you want to see more content like this, and that if you're not already subscribed, you do so. If you did find this helpful, please give me a thumbs up. And you can also turn your notifications on so that when I do post a new video, normally it's every Wednesday, but lately I've been posting more often. So that way if I post on a non-Wednesday, you'll know right away. But yeah, I just want to thank you so much for watching like always. I really appreciate your time, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye, guys.